Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Tonight we talk about Covaxin, the made-in-India vaccine, the one administered to millions of people, 100 million jabs so far, including to the Prime Minister of India. The vaccine that the World Health Organization refuses to approve. It's become an absurd pattern. They meet, they demand more data, and they delay the approval. India says all the requisite data has been furnished. The WHO says it wants more. So here's a question that we want to ask. Is this delay about procedure or prejudice? Did the WHO hold all other vaccines to the same standards as the Indian vaccine? What data did the Chinese vaccine makers give, for instance? How long did the approvals for Moderna and Pfizer take? Is the World Health Organization deliberately blocking Covaxin, and how does it impact the millions of people who have taken this jab? Many countries have approved Covaxin, by the way. Oman was the latest to do it. But the WHO won't. It has pushed the decision to next week, and even that's not a given. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss why the WHO is not approving the Indian jab. Also on the show, Sri Lanka has set up a task force to implement one country, one law, a uniform code for citizens of all religions. Why is this controversial? We'll tell you the full story. Weeks after Joe Biden said America has achieved its purpose in Afghanistan, the Pentagon says it fears an ISIS attack in 6 months. Who will prevent it? They're hoping the Taliban will. And if you think that's strange, how about a fourth COVID shot? The US is pushing for it. Is it science or profit from the pandemic? And World Cup matches are becoming less about cricket and more about controversies. We'll talk about players taking the knee. Is it activism or performance? We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Days before the crucial COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, the United Nations warns that the planet is on track for a catastrophic average 2.7 degrees Celsius temperature rise this century.
These reports is so another thundering wake-up call.
The global body warns that current pledges to cut greenhouse gas emissions are not enough. The African Union suspends Sudan over the military coup in the country. The Pan-African body says that the suspension would be in place till a transnational authority is restored in the country. The move comes after the Prime Minister, Abdallah Hamdok, was allowed to return home under tight security. Washington revokes the U.S. license of one of China's biggest telecom companies, China Telecom, citing national security reasons. The telecom company will have to terminate its services in the U.S. within 60 days. The U.S. cites the Chinese government's control over the company as a primary reason behind its decision. Brazilian far-right President Jair Bolsonaro could face criminal charges over his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. A Brazilian Senate investigative committee has approved a report which could indict Bolsonaro for 9 crimes, including crimes against humanity. China insists that Taiwan has no right to join the United Nations. This after the United States called for the democratic island to have a greater role in the world body. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he regretted that Taiwan has been increasingly excluded on the world stage. Judges in Nepal's Supreme Court boycott their benches, holding up hundreds of cases. They are calling for the resignation of Chief Justice Kulendra Shamshir Rana, who has been accused of making deals with political parties. Rana has refused to step down. Australia lifts its strict international travel restrictions for its fully vaccinated citizens and permanent residents. From November 1st, citizens can travel internationally without any special permits or exemption. At least 2 people have died in a violent storm sweeping southern Italy. Widespread flooding in Sicily forces schools to close down with traffic restrictions in place across the region. England have continued their perfect start to the ICC Men's T20 World Cup, thrashing Bangladesh by 8 wickets to claim their second consecutive win. Another excellent bowling display from the ODI World Champions saw Bangladesh restricted to 124 for 9 in Abu Dhabi. Jason Roy then set up the chase with a blistering half-century, while David Malan and Johnny Bairstow took England to the target in the 15th over. Olympic gold medalist Neeraj Chopra leads an unprecedented list of 11 athletes who have been recommended for the Khel Ratna Award, India's highest sporting honor. Other Tokyo medal winners Ravi Daya, Lovlina Borgohain and P.R. Srijish have also been selected, alongside the 5 Paralympic gold medalists. Women's cricket captain Mithali Raj and men's football top scorer Sunil Chetri were also recommended.
The world has a new ticket to freedom. Vaccines. You need one to travel, you need one to eat in a diner, and in some places you need a vaccine to get a job. Welcome to the post-pandemic world. Vaccines have become the key to opportunities and freedom. But not every vaccine will do the job. You need approval from the World Health Organization. The technical term is Emergency Use Licensing, or the EUL. So far, 7 vaccines have got this approval: Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Covishield, Johnson & Johnson, Sinopharm and Sinovac. 7. You'll notice one big name that is missing from this list. India's homegrown jab, Covaxin. The WHO still hasn't approved Covaxin, and this is a big worry for Indians. If the WHO okays a jab, it's like a global recognition. Most countries will follow. They can import Covaxin. They can welcome tourists and travelers who got Covaxin. As I said, it's a ticket to freedom. But the WHO is dragging its feet. On Tuesday, they asked Bharat Biotech, the makers of Covaxin, for additional clarifications, basically more data. Their expert committee will meet again on November 3rd. Hopefully by then, there will be a final decision. But what is the cost of this delay? Is this about technicalities? Or is there more to the story? First, let's look at the cost. India has administered more than 118 million doses of Covaxin. Now, assuming all of them are double doses, we are still talking about 59 million people who have taken this jab. 59 million. These people cannot travel abroad. They will have to get multiple COVID tests or quarantine in some cases. Among them are students who want to study abroad, expat workers who returned to India during the pandemic, corporate workers who work for multinationals. A lot of them want to travel, but their plans are on hold because the WHO has not approved Covaxin. It's also the jab that the Indian Prime Minister took. Question number 2. Is this just a technicality? Well, that's what the WHO says. They say no corners will be cut. There must be a thorough evaluation to ensure that the vaccine is quote-unquote safe and effective, which is great. But at what point does protocol become punishment? Here's a list of countries that use Covaxin: Guyana, India, Iran, Mauritius, Mexico, Nepal, Paraguay, the Philippines and Zimbabwe. That's 9 countries that already use Covaxin, plus 2 European nations. They recognize it for travel: Estonia and Greece. Surely this wide usage must count for something. Covaxin's approval process has been a predictable story. The WHO meets, they discuss Covaxin data, they demand more information and schedule another meeting. That's how it goes. And this has been going on since April 2021. That's when Bharat Biotech sought emergency listing 6 months ago. On the 9th of July, the company said all required data had been submitted. The WHO's decision was expected in 6 weeks. As of today, it's been 110 days, that's 15 weeks, and still no decision. Was it the same for other vaccines? Did the WHO keep Moderna and Pfizer waiting? No, it did not. Pfizer got the approval 6 weeks after submitting data, Moderna and AstraZeneca after 9 weeks. Did these other vaccines submit perfect data? No, they did not. Take the 2 Chinese vaccines, for example, Sinopharm and Sinovac. Here's what the WHO wrote about both these jabs, and listen to this carefully. I have the quote. Few older adults were enrolled in clinical trials, so efficacy could not be estimated in this age group. Nevertheless, the WHO is not recommending an upper age limit for the vaccine because data collected during subsequent use in multiple countries suggest the vaccine is likely to have a protective effect in older persons. The word likely is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. What happened to not cutting corners? What happened to safety and efficacy? Does it not apply to Chinese vaccines? 2 things could be happening here. 1, the WHO is delaying this on purpose. For what joy only they can explain. 2, Bharat Biotech has not offered complete data. What is the Indian government saying? The health ministry claims the vaccine data is fine. All this delay is just a procedural problem. Well, that delay has real-world consequences. And the most frustrating part is this, the lack of clarity. We don't know what data Bharat Biotech has submitted. We don't know what data the WHO wants. All we know is that millions of Indians are stuck in a limbo. They can't apply for visas. They can't apply for education abroad. We're not saying blindly approve Covaxin. We're talking about risk-benefit assessment because remember, this is emergency use listing. This is not licensing. For Chinese vaccines, the WHO used data beyond clinical trials. So the question is, do 118 million doses of Covaxin not count? Do approvals from 9 countries not count? There's a lot of ambiguity in this approval process. Come 3rd November, maybe Covaxin will end up with a green light, but this process and this lack of transparency must change. And as the world waits for the WHO nod, and 52% of the world waits for a first shot, the United States is rolling out a 4th shot for those who are immunocompromised. 4th shot. So here's a question. Is the booster shot even required? Or is the 4th shot America's way to sell excess vaccines that are nearing expiry date? Our next report finds out.
Have you taken your first shot of the Wuhan virus vaccine? If yes, you are among the 48.9% of the world's population, the lucky lot that has received at least the first shot. Nearly 52% of the world has not. Most of this population is in low-income countries. Just 3% of the people living in these countries have received the first dose of the Wuhan virus vaccine. This is what vaccine inequity looks like. And here's what makes it worse. The United States of America, the world's richest country, is now rolling out a 4th dose of the vaccine. 66% of the people in the United States have already received a single shot. 56% are fully vaccinated. 21% of adult Americans do not want the vaccine. Instead of focusing on changing the minds of the anti-vaxxers, the United States is running to roll out a 4th shot. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has said some immunocompromised people will now be able to get another booster dose. It will be available 6 months after the 3rd shot and will be given to those who have received Pfizer or Moderna vaccines. In August, the CDC authorized a 3rd dose for those who are immunocompromised, either moderately or severely. The 3rd dose was not branded a booster shot, but an additional dose. The 4th shot is now being considered a booster. Do we even need one? Here's what the World Health Organization says. 1. Vaccines are performing well in terms of preventing serious cases of the Wuhan virus. 2. There is no evidence that suggests the need for a booster shot. Yet, rich countries like the United States and the United Kingdom are offering booster doses, as are Germany, France, and a total of 35 countries. Any idea why? Did you know the G7 and EU together hold 241 million doses of vaccines that could expire by the end of this year? Is the booster shot nothing but a sales pitch? Are rich countries trying to get rid of vaccines in their freezers before they expire? If that's the case, why can't countries like the United States help inoculate 52% of the world population that is still waiting for the first shot? As it is, the United States has reportedly delivered only 190 million of the 1.2 billion promised doses. It looks like countries are forgetting the ABC of the virus. They are ignoring the basics. The Wuhan virus is communicable. The virus will continue mutating. So there's no use quadruply securing those who are already safe. Instead, give a life-saving dose to those in real need. Because let's face it, none of us is safe until all of us are safe. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
One country, one law. This slogan could soon be a reality in Sri Lanka. Their president has set up a task force. The task is clear: create a uniform law for Sri Lanka. Sounds like a fair ask. All citizens should be bound by one law. But like always, there's more to it. The problem begins with a man heading the task force, a controversial Buddhist monk, a highly polarizing and divisive figure in Sri Lanka. We'll tell you about the man in a bit. First, let's tell you about the move. One country, one law. This was an election promise of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the central plank of his campaign in 2019. He promised to abolish all personal laws in Sri Lanka. He promised to introduce one general law, a code that would apply to all religions and communities. Buddhists, who form the majority population in Sri Lanka, Hindus, who form the biggest minority group, Muslims, who account for almost 10% of the population, and Christians, who make up 6%. This law will apply to all of them. Then we have the ethnicities, the Sinhalese, almost 75% of the Sri Lankan population. Sri Lankan Tamils, 11.2%. Moors, who are predominantly Muslims, they account for 9.3%. And Indian Tamils, who view themselves as separate from Sri Lankan Tamils, they make up 4.2% of the population of the country. So what Gotabaya Rajapaksa wants is one law for all these people, one law that covers citizens of all religions and ethnicities in Sri Lanka. And here's what he's doing for that. Rajapaksa has formed a 13-member task force. He has done so through a special gazette. A copy of it is on your screen. It mentions two key objects. Number one, to carry out a study and prepare a draft for one country, one law. The second objective is to study previous drafts on the subject and suggest changes if needed. Now, this committee, the new task force that the president has formed, has been given 4 months to submit its report. February 28th next year, to be precise. That's when, by then, they have to submit the report. According to the Sri Lankan President's office, the aim of this committee is to compile a report so that, and I'm quoting, all citizens are treated alike in the eye of the law. So far, so good. All citizens must be treated alike in the eye of the law. But this is where things get interesting and controversial. The man entrusted with compiling this report happens to be a hardline Buddhist monk. He is notorious for anti-Muslim rhetoric. His name is Galagoda Ate Gnanasara Thero. He belongs to an ultra-nationalist organization called Bodu Balasena, which roughly translates to the Buddhist Power Force. It's a name they live up to. The body is known for its raids on several non-Sinhalese meetings, rallies and religious gatherings. Also for its attacks on Christians and Muslims in Sri Lanka. The man himself, Mr. Thero, has been to jail. In 2018, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. What for? For interrupting a court proceeding over the abduction of a Sri Lankan journalist. Some military officials were accused in this case. When they were refused bail, Thiro shouted at the presiding judge and lawyers. He also threatened the journalist's wife. So he was held guilty for contempt of court and he was sent to jail. In 2019, when Rajapaksa became president, Thiro was pardoned by the Sri Lankan president. Look at the irony here. A monk once held for contempt is now heading a legal reform panel in Sri Lanka. And he is not alone. There are 12 others with him on this new task force, a 13-member team. Most of them belong to the Sinhalese community. 4 of them are Muslims, a cleric, a journalist, a lecturer and a scholar. But we must note here that there is no one from the minority Tamil community. Is this a deliberate omission? The Sri Lankan opposition and civil society believes it is, and they are protesting. They say this committee is the definition of irony, and it cannot be trusted to come up with anything valuable. A Tamil lawmaker has said this, and I'm quoting, "What is the purpose of establishing a committee if the existing law cannot be implemented correctly? The appointment of a criminal to lead this committee is almost a joke in itself." Then we have Marianne David, a prominent journalist, who has said, and I'm quoting again, "Dismayed but not surprised about the One Country, One Law presidential task force headed by Bodu Balasena's Galagoda Athe Gnanasara Thera. Where is Sri Lanka headed?" She put out another tweet saying, hoping it's a Halloween prank, but the joke's on us. Now here's the thing. Much like India, personal laws in Sri Lanka largely revolve around family, marriage and inheritance issues. This is a controversial subject in India too, the subject of a uniform civil code that this government promised. In Sri Lanka, these laws stem mostly from customs and practices of various communities. Most of these customs are heavily patriarchal in nature. They tend to bring only disadvantage to women. So essentially, principally, there is nothing wrong with what the Sri Lankan government is doing. It's only trying to get rid of outdated and exclusive laws. It's only trying to govern the country under one blanket law, which should be fine. But appointing a hardline monk with a record of spewing hatred to steer this law does not inspire confidence. Not only will it undermine the validity of the suggestions made, it will also make Sri Lankan minorities feel more alienated. We'll be tracking the story for you. For the moment, let's turn to the United States and its latest assessment. Is the US heading for another 9/11? The Pentagon certainly thinks so. May not be as dramatic, but a terror attack nonetheless. And this time, the threat is not from Al-Qaeda, it's from the Islamic State of Khorasan province, or the ISIS-K, Islamic State Khorasan, that's what they're called, the new face of terror in Afghanistan. How soon could they attack? In 6 months. That's the shortest estimate. Right now, both ISIS-K and Al-Qaeda are rebuilding. They're recruiting more youth. They're training them. They're looking for more equipment. So as things stand, neither can carry out foreign attacks, not Al-Qaeda, not ISIS-K. But that could change soon. The Pentagon says ISIS Khorasan could be ready to hit the United States in 6 to 12 months. What about Al-Qaeda? 1 to 2 years. Listen to this.
I think the intelligence community currently assesses that both ISIS-K and Al-Qaeda have the intent to conduct external operations, including against the United States, but neither currently has the capability to do so. We could see ISIS-K generate that capability in somewhere between 6 or 12 months.
That was Colin Kahl, the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense. According to his assessment, this is not a probability, this is a fact. ISIS-K and Al-Qaeda are rebuilding and they plan to strike the U.S. How does Washington plan to respond? Believe it or not, they're banking on the Taliban. Here's what the Pentagon official had to say. Let me quote. "It is our assessment that the Taliban and ISIS-K are mortal enemies. So the Taliban is highly motivated to go after ISIS-K. Their ability to do so, I think, is to be determined." Think about what the Pentagon is saying here. This is the same Taliban. They fought for 20 years. The same Taliban that killed more than 2,000 American soldiers. Today, Washington wants them to be partners. They say the Taliban is highly motivated. But are they? Here's what a Taliban spokesperson said last month. We do not see anyone in Afghanistan who has anything to do with the Al-Qaeda. We are committed to the fact that from Afghanistan, there will not be any danger to any country. We don't call this motivation, we call this denial. According to some reports, there are more than 2,000 ISIS-K terrorists in Afghanistan. They are constantly plotting attacks on the Taliban, on mosques, and on Shia gatherings. Afghanistan's Shia community is their biggest target. Will the Taliban help them? They won't. The Taliban is a predominantly Sunni group. During the civil war, they hunted Afghan Sunnis, Afghan Shias rather, and nothing suggests that they have changed. So Joe Biden must ask himself this: is he presiding over a 9/11 in the making? Let me remind you what the US President said after the Afghan pullout. I believe that our presence in Afghanistan should be focused on the reason we went in the first place, to ensure Afghanistan would not be used as a base from which to attack our homeland again. We did that. We accomplished that objective. Well, not according to his Department of Defense. America's 20-year war was a band-aid on a bullet wound. They spent billions of dollars, they lost hundreds of lives, and for what? 6 months of difficult peace? Is ISIS or Al-Qaeda, if ISIS or Al-Qaeda rather, attack the US, it will be Joe Biden's failure. He thought he won the war. He thought the insurgents and terrorists were defeated. But the fact is, you cannot defeat shadows. All the terrorists had to do was survive. And they survived for 20 years. This assessment by the Pentagon is worrying for the US. But it should also ring alarm bells in the neighborhood. In countries like India, think about it. ISIS-K will take 6 months to hit the US, and America is 12,000 kilometers away from Afghanistan. India is right next door. So the threat is immediate for South Asia. Whether it's sleeper cells, radicalization, or direct attacks, what options does the world have then? Pressure. Push the Taliban to take action on other terrorists. Withhold aid until a meaningful plan is drawn up. The world has a 6-month window to contain this threat. Once ISIS or Al-Qaeda regain full strength, it could be too late. Do or die. That's where Afghanistan stands at the moment. As for the Taliban, they have intensified their repression of women. They have been forced to wear a burqa, not go to work or school or colleges or the cricket field. Young girls are being sold as Taliban brides, and babies are being bought to be raised as sex slaves. The Taliban have abolished the Ministry of Women's Affairs and replaced it with the repressive Ministry of Vice and Virtue. Today, it is extremely difficult for an Afghan woman to access health care, or for a woman-headed household to receive aid. You know all of this, at least I hope you do. The Taliban is trying to erase women from the society, hide them behind burqas, lock them up between 4 walls. Now, what if I told you that the world is helping the Taliban in this design? You may ask how, and I will tell you how. 1, the world is not doing very much to help Afghan women. And 2, countries are normalizing this erasure of women. And I will show you how. The Taliban, as you know, took control of Afghanistan on the 15th of August. That's when it seized Kabul. It's been 2 months. And in these 2 months, delegations from several countries and aid groups have met the Taliban. Some to help rebuild Afghanistan, some to profit from the crisis, whatever their motives. They've met the Taliban. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, for example, he met the Taliban on the 26th of October. The delegation with him was all male. On the 23rd of October, Iran's ambassador to Kabul met the Taliban. His delegation too was all male. On the 20th of October, a Russian delegation met the Taliban. It was all male. On the 17th, a delegation from Turkey met the Taliban. This is what the room looked like, more men. On the same day, a team from Kazakhstan met the Taliban. Well, here's a photo. 14 men, no women. Do you notice the trend? Countries are sending all male delegations to meet the Taliban. There are no women in discussion rooms. There are no women negotiating with the Taliban. No women talking policy to the terror group turned policy maker. The Taliban have conveniently left out women from their government and their discussion tables. And instead of pulling them up, other countries seem to be following suit. They're excluding women from policy decisions concerning the Taliban. Every country is following this trend. Qatar, Uzbekistan. On the 30th of September, the Taliban hosted a dinner for foreign ambassadors in Kabul. Most countries attended without female colleagues. Why is this happening? Why are countries normalizing this erasure of women? Humanitarian aid groups are also party to this. The International Committee of the Red Cross, for example, or the UN Children's Agency, or Doctors Without Borders, they all met the Taliban in the past few weeks. They clicked photos with its leaders. But in the frame were all men. Take a look at the UNDP delegation. Again, why? The Taliban never refused to meet women or interact with them. We have video evidence of the Taliban giving an interview to one woman journalist and taking questions from another. So what explains this aversion to include women in delegations? This question was in fact put to some aid agencies. Red Cross said that due to a last-minute scheduling change, its women staff could not attend the meeting with the Taliban. Red Crescent had the same answer. What about the countries? The co-director of Human Rights Watch thinks that countries are trying to make the Taliban happier by not bringing women. What have we come to?
I think sometimes they might think, oh, well, this will make the Taliban happier, this will make the Taliban more comfortable, and, we've got a very important issue that we're trying to, negotiate and reach agreement on with the Taliban today, so let's not make things any more difficult by bringing women with us.
Not bringing women also equals to not bringing up women's issues, unless we're expecting men to do that job for us and do it better than women. It doesn't work that way. Well, here's something countries must realize. The Taliban are in no position to negotiate on who to bring and who not to. Remember, they're the ones seeking legitimacy. They are the ones who are in desperate need of funds. They need photo ops to stay relevant. The world must leverage this and push for reform. Inclusivity in public life. The world must push for women's rights rather than normalizing this erasure from decision-making rooms. Because that's exactly what Russia, China and Pakistan appear to be doing in Moscow. They're not exactly champions of women's rights, but nonetheless, these three countries met a Taliban delegation. None of them had a woman. The world has collectively failed to help Afghan women, and today it is doing a disservice to them by normalizing the erasure of women. And here's something that is normal. Children using the internet. Children learning on the internet, growing up with the internet. But do you know what your child is doing online apart from attending class? Does your child have a social media account? Or does she have TikTok on her phone? If your answer is yes, then chances are your child may have come across objectionable content online. An investigation has revealed that TikTok is recommending videos of serial killers to children. It is also promoting content regarding firearms to children as young as 13. And what's more, some of these videos have links that help children get access to a weapon. It sounds scary. Take a look at our next report.
What is your child doing on the internet? What websites is she browsing? Is she being exposed to harmful or sexually explicit material? Is she being exposed to content promoting drugs? You think you know, but you may want to rethink. Child locks are passé. Children today know how to navigate them. They also know how to fake their age to sign up on social media websites. Once in, what do children see on social media? What are they exposed to? You wouldn't believe. Videos of serial killers. TikTok is bombarding early teens with videos promoting guns and rifles. How do we know this? An online publication called Raw Story carried out an investigation. They created a TikTok account for a fictional 13-year-old. Within hours, TikTok was recommending the 13-year-old all sorts of videos. Most of it should not have been on the app in the first place. Content promoting firearms, for example. Content with links to websites one can buy a firearm from. Content about serial killers. Videos with links for purchasing bulletproof vests. Quick reminder, all of this was being recommended to a 13-year-old. By who? TikTok. An app that looks seemingly unharmful, without the life-threatening challenges. So let us ask you once again, do you think you know what your child is doing on the internet? For all you know, she could be falling prey to cybercrime, cyberbullying, perverts. Children could be exposed to content promoting eating disorders, drugs, abuse, violence. She could be watching content glorifying bad behavior. One thing's for sure, tech companies don't care. Earlier today, the United States Senate pulled up YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat. These companies were asked what they were doing to ensure that young users were safe on their platforms. The senators reportedly received little commitment. One said big tech is preying on children to make more money. You see, it is a business of harm, so it falls on the parents to do their bit to ensure your child is not scarred online. What can you do? Encourage your child to stay off mobile phones and laptops as much as possible. Emphasize on the value of real-life communication. Ask her to pursue her hobbies offline. Spend more time with her. Ask her to show you the content she has been viewing online. Teach her how to spot and dodge online predators. Do what you can to keep your child safe online. Because let's not forget, we are dealing with a generation that's growing with technology, that is using tech for learning, for playing, for communicating. Children are using technology as they should, and it is now up to the parents to start playing the content moderator, because big tech simply won't. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
On Tuesday morning, West Asia witnessed another historic moment. A direct flight from Israel landed in Riyadh. It was the first ever Israeli flight to land in Saudi Arabia. This is the latest in a series of indications on how the Jewish state and the Islamic kingdom are silently but steadily formalizing their relations. For quite some time now, the two countries have been making such symbolic moves. In September last year, for instance, when the Abraham Accords were signed, Saudi Arabia opened its airspace for Israel. It allowed Israeli planes to fly over the country. Then in November, reports emerged that the Saudi Crown Prince met Israel's then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the city of Neom in northwest Saudi Arabia. Riyadh denied that the meeting took place, as did Israel. Now they seem to have dropped the pretense, though. Just look at the pace of developments. On Monday, a direct flight from Saudi Arabia landed in Tel Aviv, and today, a private jet from Israel landed in Riyadh. 2 flights in 2 days. How do we perceive this? What are these countries up to? Well, they won't tell. Officially, they're still adversaries, with no diplomatic or economic ties. No matter who has been in power on both sides, the ties have never been formalized. The Saudis have expressed the desire for a reset on some occasions, but Israel's never-ending rift with Palestine and the constraints of public opinion have stopped them from initiating the process. As you know, Saudi Arabia is considered the de facto leader of the Islamic world. It's where Islam was born. It's where the holiest sites in Islam are located. This has given the kingdom a symbolic standing, an importance which is unparalleled. Riyadh remembers this at all times. If it were to openly embrace Israel, there will most certainly be a backlash. It could dent its undisputed standing in the Islamic world. There are at least 15 Islamic countries that continue to ban both direct flights and overflying traffic to and from Israel. That's Afghanistan, Algeria, Bangladesh, Brunei, Iraq, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Malaysia, Morocco, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, Somalia and Tunisia. 15 countries. These are all countries that hold Saudi Arabia in high regard. So Riyadh has a tough balancing act to do. maintain legitimacy as the leader of Islam and establish ties with the Zionist state. It will be a tightrope walk, especially right now when Israel is on an overdrive in Palestine. It's building 1,300 new settlements in the West Bank, a piece of land that does not really belong to Israel. The Israelis captured this land in the 1967 war, and they've controlled it ever since. They now plan to strengthen their control by sending Jewish settlers to the West Bank. 1,300 new residences have been announced. Talks to build 3,000 more are still underway. And that's not all. Israel has also designated 6 Palestinian civil society groups as terror outfits. These groups are reportedly rights organizations. Well, Israel says they're not. Israel accuses them of funneling money to extremists. So it's seizing their assets, arresting their employees, and criminalizing any expression of support. Last we checked, the Saudis were yet to respond to Israel's moves. They haven't said a word, and critics say they won't. They believe that Saudi Arabia has already given up on the Palestinian cause. It has bigger fish to fry, like Iran. Well, whatever be the case, Palestine is on the boil again. Riyadh has chosen not to speak. Neither have the other Arab states who signed the Abraham Accords. Interestingly, it's the US that has expressed, quote-unquote, strong opposition to Israel's plans. West Asia is in for some dramatic days ahead. And we end tonight's show with some cricket chat. The T20 World Cup is underway in the UAE. We've had some exciting matches, but all the talk is about stuff happening outside the ground. The politics, the activism, the gestures. The latest controversy is brewing in the South African team. At the center of events is one player, wicketkeeper batsman Quinton de Kock. Most of you probably know him. He's a flamboyant batsman and an important part of the South African team. But on Tuesday, he did not take the field. He was fit, he was hungry, but he did not play. And now we know why. Hours before the match on Tuesday, the South African Cricket Board released an order. What did it say? All players must take the knee to support Black Lives Matter. It wasn't a request, it was an order. You had to take the knee, or you had to sit out. De Kock decided to sit out. South Africa went on to beat the West Indies, but more than happiness, there was confusion among the fans. Was Quinton de Kock being racist, or was he taking a personal stand? Now, this is a very sensitive issue in South Africa. This is a country that has struggled for years under apartheid. And cricket was one of the biggest casualties. For 21 years, South Africa was absent from international cricket. Nobody is questioning this history. But does it mean that every South African cricketer must take the knee? Does it make them racist if they don't? Until a few months back, the cricket board had a different policy. Players had multiple options. They could take the knee or raise their hands or stand in attention. But the World Cup, you see, is a global tournament. So many teams have decided to take the knee as part of their messaging, including Australia, West Indies, even India. I'm sure you saw the pictures on Sunday. The whole Indian cricket team took the knee. It was all kinds of bizarre. 3 days on, social media still can't figure out why the Indian team did it. Well, neither can we. Team orders, says Virat Kohli. But South Africa did not have this policy, not until Tuesday. So when the board sprung it on Quinton de Kock, he chose not to do it. What's the team saying about all of this? Well, they were taken aback, but they respect his choice, they say.
I think obviously as a team, we're obviously surprised and taken aback by the news. Obviously, Quinton is a big player for the team. In saying that, Quinton is an adult. He's a man in his own shoes. We respect his decision. We respect his convictions, and I know that he'll be standing behind whatever decision that he's taken.
South Africa's cricket board has in fact taken notice of de Kock's decision. They're awaiting more feedback from the team management. Until then, all players will have to take the knee, which means no Quinton de Kock. Does he have a reason for not taking the knee? Well, he does, but he doesn't want to reveal it. During a tour of West Indies, Quinton de Kock had this to say, and I'm quoting from what he said: "My reason, I'll keep it to myself. It's my own personal opinion. It's everyone's decision. No one's forced to do anything, not in life." Well, that's fair enough. De Kock is paid to play cricket. He's in the UAE to play cricket. Whether he wants to take the knee or not is his choice. It doesn't make him racist. It doesn't make him the villain. It makes him a human being with his own opinion. Since when is that a bad thing? I understand what the South African Cricket Board is trying to do here. They represent a country with a horrible racial history. So they want to project a united front. But symbols do not defeat racism. Actions do. South Africa was reinstated to cricket in 1991. For the next 30 years, they did not have a single black captain. Think about that. 76% of South Africa's population is black, yet very few of them made it to the cricket team. That is racism. Lack of opportunities and resources, that is racism. It was only in March this year that South Africa got its first black captain, Temba Bavuma, the man you just heard speak. Cricket South Africa must focus on these issues. It must take concrete steps to address systemic racism. We're not saying that symbols are pointless. By all means, take a knee or raise your fist. But it should be a personal choice. It should come from an individual's heart. If you're ordered to do it, what purpose does it serve? You're violating a person's choice and also reducing this gesture to something mechanical. People who know Quinton de Kock have come out in his support. They say he's not racist. He does support Black Lives Matter. What he doesn't support is this cricketing bureaucracy, basically being told what to do. As a society, we must learn to accept these differences. Cricket has a history of being a great unifier. It can be a force of good, but not if you force players to do something. Let them take a knee, let them raise their fist, or let them just stand in silence, because tokenism does not define you. So here's our message to the South African Cricket Board. Put Quinton de Kock on the field. Let him do what he does best. Entertain us with his great batting, of course, not against India. On that note, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
Allowing athletes to personalise based on the inside, allowing the athlete to wear the jacket like a backpack without overheating. Gilmore is wearing our dynamic dressing system. Cassie is wearing the quilted insulated scarf with a hidden zipper pocket.